Welcome to the debate. Today, we're not just analyzing a news story. We are looking at a crime scene. And I don't say that lightly. I'm talking about the attempted murder of sporting meritocracy, really. We're talking about the breaking news regarding Shakur Stevenson, fresh off just a masterclass performance at Madison Square Garden against Teofimo Lopez. I mean, a fight where he wins the WBO super lightweight title, becomes a four-weight world champion. He has been unceremoniously stripped of his WBC lightweight title.
Yeah. It's a moment that's going to be remembered, absolutely. But while you're looking at the crime scene, I'm kind of looking at the motive. And honestly, the sheer stupidity of the perpetrator. The World Boxing Council declared the title vacant because Stevenson refused to pay a sanctioning fee for a fight where, and let's be just crystal clear on this for everyone listening, the WBC belt was not even on the line. They wanted money for a fight they had nothing to do with.
And that is the absolute crux of this whole thing. I have to admit, I come to this discussion today with just a profound sense of anger. This isn't just boxing politics as usual. This is a betrayal. I mean, we spend decades following this sport, believing that the belts represent a lineage, right? A history of the man beating the man. And here you have a governing body just destroying that lineage over what is, at the end of the day, bureaucratic greed. It's an ethical failure that threatens the very integrity of the championship itself. They've taken the green and gold belt, supposed to be the most prestigious prize, and turned it into a ransom note.
See, I share your anger 100%, but I'm coming at it from a different angle. You're calling this a betrayal of the sport's honor. I'm calling this a mask-off moment. This proves that the alphabet soup organizations, the WBC included, are not regulators. They're not the NBA. They're not the NFL. They are vendors. They're businesses selling a shiny accessory, and when the customer, in this case Shakur Stevenson, decides the price is too high for a product he isn't even using, they panic. This is just the desperate flailing of an obsolete business model.
I see why you view it that way, as a business deal gone wrong. But let me give you a different perspective on why this specific case hurts the sport so deeply. You have to look at the timeline. We're talking about a fighter, Stevenson, who just days ago put on a clinic. He beat Teofimo Lopez with scores of 119-109. It was a domination. He's undefeated. He is the lineal king of that division. And almost immediately, the WBC moves to strip him. Shakur called them crooks, and honestly, looking at the facts, it's really hard to argue with him on that. Crooks is the word he used, and he's right. But let's look at why he used it. He said, and I'm quoting him here, the WBC didn't even have S to do with this fight. And that's the reality. He fought for a WBO title. The WBC had no officials there, no supervisors, no stake in the bout whatsoever, yet they demanded their cut. You're focused on the disgrace to the sport, and you're right to be, but I want to focus on Stevenson's reaction. He said, "Take your belt, it don't make me." That right there might be the most important sentence spoken in boxing this year.
It's a powerful statement, absolutely, but it's also a tragic one. It suggests that the symbols of achievement in our sport have become meaningless. I mean, when the best fighter in the world says the belt doesn't make him, he's correct, of course, but it implies the belt has failed in its only job, to signify who the best fighter is. By taking the belt away from the undefeated champion, the WBC has effectively delegitimized their own championship.
Exactly. And that is why I argue this is a structural collapse. You're mourning the loss of honor, but I'm looking at the extortion that's just baked into the mechanics of this whole thing. They're claiming this is about rules and regulations, but Stevenson sees it for what it is, a shakedown. He refused to pay what was reported to be around $100,000 to an organization that provided zero value to his fight against Lopez. This isn't just about honor. It's about a laborer refusing to be exploited by a rent-seeking middleman.
I want to drill down into that mechanics aspect you mentioned, because the details here are infuriating, and I think people need to understand exactly how this works. We need to talk about the specific rule that allowed this to happen. This all relies on something called Rule 7.3.
Right. And for our listeners who might not be deep in the bylaws of sanctioning bodies, and I envy you if you aren't, this is where the absurdity really shines. According to the analysis from Ade Oladipo, Rule 7.3 says that even if a WBC champion fights for another organization's belt, in this case, the WBO title at 140 pounds, They are obligated to pay 50% of the standard WBC sanctioning fee.
It is absolutely baffling. I mean, it's a protection racket. There is no other way to describe it. Let's use a real-world analogy here. Imagine you own a house, right? And you hire a contractor to fix the roof. Then, a contractor you didn't hire shows up and demands 50% of the payment just because you've used him in the past. It's nonsensical. Stevenson was asked to pay roughly $100,000 for a fight that, by his own admission, the WBC had nothing to do with.
And that's the mask-off moment. In a functional regulatory system, fees cover the cost of regulation. Judges, referees, drug testing, oversight. If the WBC isn't regulating the fight, what is that $100,000 for? It's a tax on existence. It's a fee for the privilege of not being stripped. And Shakur's response was just so visceral. He posted on social media saying, $100K to some people who don't deserve it. Nah, Leilani, I'd rather give it to you, baby girl.
That mention of his daughter, Leilani, it just underscores the human element here, doesn't it? These fees aren't just numbers on a spreadsheet. They are taking money directly out of the pockets of the athletes, who are the ones actually taking the punches. Stevenson is saying, effectively, I put my life on the line, I did the work, and I'm going to provide for my family, not fund your bureaucracy. It's a moral stance. And for the WBC to act as if they're entitled to his daughter's future, I mean, it's repulsive.
It is, but I'm sorry. I just don't buy that the WBC cares about the morality of it. They're operating like a business protecting its revenue stream. They stripped him not because of the rules. I mean, rules can be waived. Exceptions are made all the time in boxing. Whenever it suits the promoters, they stripped him because he threatened their business model. If Shakur Stevenson, a pound-for-pound star, can get away with not paying the fee, then everyone will stop paying. They had to make an example of him.
I'm not entirely convinced by that, because while I agree they're protecting their wallet, I think there's something more personal, more vindictive at play here. It feels like a targeted vendetta against a certain type of fighter. We can't view this in a vacuum. We have to look at the connection to Terrence Bud Crawford.
That is a very compelling point. The pattern is certainly there. You can't look at one without the other.
Shakur himself made the connection explicitly. He asked, because y'all got beef with Bud, so come at me for it. I mean, we have to remember what happened with Crawford. He beats Canelo. Let's say he becomes the undisputed super middleweight champion. And then what happens in December? The WBC strips him of the 168-pound title. And why? Because he refused to pay the fees.
Right, and Crawford's reaction was legendary. He said, boy, you better slap your fang self. I ain't paying your ass. And then he questioned why he should pay $300,000 when he'd already generated massive revenue. The WBC tried to claim it was for their boxers fund, their charity, but Crawford wasn't having any of it.
And frankly, neither am I. When you have the two best American fighters, arguably the two most skilled technicians in the sport today, who are close friends and training partners, both in open revolt against your organization, you have a massive problem. The WBC is, as Shakur put it, eating themselves alive. They are cannibalizing their own prestige by attacking the fighters who actually give the belt value. They are practically begging to be irrelevant.
I'd come at it from a different way on the value thing, though. I think what Crawford and Stevenson have realized is that the undisputed label, which we've all sort of fetishized for the last few years, is becoming a trap. It's a financial trap. To be undisputed means paying 4 different organizations roughly 3% of your purse each. That adds up to millions of dollars. The dissenter in me says that Stevenson and Crawford are the first ones to really do the math and say, the ROI just isn't there.
But that hurts the sport. That's my concern. If the best fighters decide the belts aren't worth it, we lose the structure of the sport. We lose the ability to say, this man is the undisputed champion. We go back to a fractured landscape where everyone claims to be the best, but nobody holds all the hardware. It's a tragedy for the historical record.
Is it a tragedy or is it a correction? Because right now, the historical record is being manipulated by fees. Let's talk about the lightweight division now that Stevenson's been stripped. The title is vacant, so who fights for it? This is where the comedy really starts.
This is exactly what I mean by the degradation of lineage. Currently, William Zepeda is ranked number 1. Jedier Herrera is the interim champion. Look, in a sane world, to be the man, you have to beat the man. Stevenson is the man. He's undefeated. He didn't lose in the ring. He lost via press release. And now we're going to have Zepeda or Herrera elevated to world champion without ever having thrown a punch at the actual king of the division.
And that is why the belt is now just paper.
It's confetti. It's a participation trophy.
But it matters. It matters because history records lists of champions. 50 years from now, someone will look at Wikipedia or whatever exists then and see WBC lightweight champion, Jadier Herrera. They won't see the asterisk that says because the actual champion wouldn't pay a toll. It falsifies history. The green and gold belt is supposed to be the premier prize. Now it's just a sign that you wrote a check.
That's an interesting point, though I would frame it differently. The public knows. The fans know. We're in the information age. Tim Brightly made a fascinating point about this recently. He argued that Shakur is actually going to be more popular than Crawford because he's doing this his way. Bradley said Stevenson isn't Ali with the charisma, but he's becoming a superstar through pure skill and by defying the system.
Bradley's point is optimistic, but it relies on the audience being highly educated. It relies on the fans ignoring the marketing of the sanctioning bodies. But casual fans look for belts. They look for that visual signifier of greatness. By stripping Stevenson, the WBC creates confusion. They muddy the waters. They make it harder for the sport to grow because nobody knows who the actual champion is anymore.
I think the waters are already mud, and Shakur is just stepping out of the swamp. Bradley said Shakur is becoming a superstar with his skill. That is the only currency that matters now. If you are unbeatable, you don't need a belt to tell people you're the best. The belt needs you to give it credibility. By taking it away, the WBC has just admitted their belt is irrelevant to Stevenson's status. He's still the guy who schooled Teofimo Lopez. The belt being gone doesn't change that reality.
It doesn't change the reality of his skill, no, but it leaves the division in chaos, and it opens the door for alternatives that might be just as dangerous. We have to discuss the other player in this drama who hasn't said much but is looming large.
You're talking about the existential threat, the Dana White factor.
Yes, we cannot ignore the timing of this. Dana White has been circling boxing for years, teasing Zuffa boxing, criticizing the broken model of the sport.
And this specific controversy is the perfect commercial for the UFC model. I mean, think about it. In the UFC, you don't pay a sanctioning fee to keep your belt. The organization is the promoter and the regulator. Dana White doesn't have to say a word. The WBC is making his argument for him. Fans are exhausted. They're tired of the alphabet soup. They're tired of fights not happening because of mandatories and fees.
I see the appeal of a centralized model, certainly. It offers clarity, one champion per division, the best fight the best. But I am always wary of monopolies. The UFC model has its own issues with fighter pay and lack of autonomy. However, I have to admit, the WBC is acting like they want to be put out of business. They are practically handing the keys to Dana White.
Exactly. The current model is broken. When you have an ecosystem where the regulators are actually just for-profit companies extracting wealth from the talent, eventually the talent will revolt. Stevenson and Crawford are the tip of the spear. If Dana White comes in now and says, come to Zuffa Boxing, we have one belt, no sanctioning fees, and we know who the champion is, that sounds incredibly appealing to a fan base that just watched the lineal lightweight king get stripped for saving his money.
It's a compelling argument. The WBC is inadvertently advertising that their belts are for sale, not for winning. If the only thing separating the champion from the contender is a bank transfer, then the sport has lost its soul. And that is what enrages me. They're selling the soul of boxing for a 3% cut.
And that's why I say let it burn. The advocate in you wants to save the tradition, but the tradition has become a parasite. The host organism, the sport of boxing, is trying to shake off the parasite. That's what Stevenson is doing.
We're nearing the end of our time, but I want to summarize where we stand. I look at this situation, Shakur Stevenson, a brilliant generational talent, stripped of his title days after a career-defining win, and I just feel a deep sense of loss. This is a sad week for boxing tradition. The WBC has chosen bureaucratic greed over sporting integrity. They have looked at the heir apparent to the pound-for-pound throne and told him, you don't matter as much as our fee. It leaves the lightweight division in chaos, and it confirms Shakur's assessment that they are crooks. It is a failure of stewardship that I find unforgivable.
And I look at the same situation and see unnecessary destruction. I don't feel sadness. I feel like we're finally seeing the truth. Shakur Stevenson and Terence Crawford have shown that the emperor has no clothes. The era of the sanctioning body holding leverage over the starfighter is ending. Shakur said, "Take your belt, it don't make me." That's the mantra of the new era. The fighter makes the belt, and if the WBC doesn't realize that, they will become a relic. This isn't a tragedy, it's a revolution.
A revolution that leaves the history books in tatters, unfortunately. But perhaps you're right. Perhaps we've reached the breaking point where the only way forward is through the rubble of the old system.
History books are written by the winners, and right now, Shakur Stevenson is winning in the ring and in the court of public opinion. The WBC is just holding an empty belt.
An empty belt and a bruised reputation. We encourage you, the listener, to look at the source material, look at Stevenson's statements, and decide for yourself. Does the belt make the fighter, or does the fighter make the belt?
I think we know the answer.
Until next time, this has been The Debate. Thank you for listening.